I'm Mary Reece from NJPSA and FEA, and today is the second day of our fall conference, NJPSA, FEA, and NJASCD. And we're really thrilled that Mike Schmoker came from Arizona to join us this morning. He had much to tell us, a lot of thoughtful conversation, and I'd just like to ask him a few things related to the presentation that he just gave to us. Welcome. Happy you're here.
Great to be here. Thank you, Mary.
So you started off by talking about Michael Fullen's Skinny.
Mm-hmm.
And you said the smallest number of high leverage, easy to understand actions that unleash stunningly powerful consequences.
Yes.
And then you went on to talk for the rest of the hour about the three most powerful impacts that you feel are significant for teaching and learning today. So can you talk a little bit more about that?
I'm happy to. The three things that have emerged in the last many decades of my own research, and for which there is an enormous amount of affirmation and confirmation, are these three things. One of them is curriculum. In other words, what we teach to students, and the coherence with which we offer content and skills to students matters probably more than any other factor, and it lays the foundation for and is part of the other two factors. The second of which is literacy. Literacy, in a way, is part of curriculum. If you say we've got a great curriculum, but there's really not all that much reading or writing instruction in it, I would say, well, you don't have a curriculum yet.
Sure.
Because the stuff of a good curriculum ought to be lots of reading and writing. That ought to be integral to good curriculum. When we read and write a lot, we get smarter. We read better. We think critically better. The evidence for all of these things is overwhelming. The third piece is a certain kind of instruction, and many of us acquaint the kind of scheme that I share. They find it to mimic or be awfully close to what we used to call the Madeline Hunter model. The interesting thing about that is, on the one hand, people kind of say, oh, well, that old dowdy-sounding Madeline Hunter model. Here's what's interesting. Bob Marzano, Doug Lemov, John Hattie, any number of, I want to say, our most popular, trusted researchers all use her language that she used to codify good instruction. Doesn't mean we have to agree with everything Madeline Hunter wrote, but the heart and soul of effective instruction, which she did so much to advance and again to define, is making sure that you teach in small, understandable chunks or steps in a lesson. And between each one, you find out if and how well and how many of your students are mastering that step or chunk before you move on. That's the way we should be teaching, such that our goal, we don't always reach it, but our goal is for every student at every step to be keeping up. That's a rare kind of teaching. If it was more common, it would put me out of a job.
I think it's really interesting the way you've described your current teaching, and that you stay in the classroom, not just at the college level, but in the K-12 environment.
Yes.
And are you using it as a place to incorporate all of the research that you're doing and seeing the results?
Well, yes, and I wish I could say that it's all cutting-edge research, but it's not. It's basically the same old stuff I did literally starting in the 1980s when I was a teacher. It's not much different than the way I taught then, but I do it to keep myself fresh, and frankly, I do it to try different kinds of teaching on different topics in grade levels that I haven't had that much experience in. Right now, I'm really hitting like first grade and fifth grade, because I haven't had too much experience there, and it's been great fun. And of course, I normally have people observing me in order to see how to do this kind of teaching.
So when you go into these schools, you have other teachers within the
and the superintendent, and the assistant superintendent, and the principal, and maybe a couple of other teachers. So I'm always a little rusty, of course, because I only teach a handful of times each school year. But it's still fun and productive for me. I hope it is for them. I think it is.
Well, I know that you mentioned in your presentation our Connected Action Roadmap, which
Yes.
is something that our organization has designed, particularly with our Executive Director, Pat Wright. A process of school improvement that brings in standards, assessment, teacher effectiveness, climate and culture, all around the use, with the use of PLCs. And I know that you were saying all of those concepts need to be in place before we can have effective PLCs. And I'm wondering whether you can talk a little more about that.
Well, sure. PLCs are teams of teachers working together to refine and improve the delivery, the successful delivery of topic, skills, standards, what have you. Unless you define what those are, so that teachers know what they are, they know about when to teach them and on what schedule, and it's the same basic, for the most part, curriculum as their PLC colleagues. We can't expect, and Marzano and Dufour were very strong in this, you can't even begin to do PLC work. It would be like asking two people to help each other to sing two entirely different songs for a concert. It's not impossible, but it's minimally productive compared with working from the same document.
So why don't you just tell us in closing, what steps do you feel, based upon your research, need to be put in place in order for those PLCs to be most effective?
Well, because there's a good handful of steps. I'll give the brief version. For what it's worth, I did write a book called Leading with Focus, and it's an implementation guide for all the stuff that I advocate. That said, there's different ways you can do it. There's not a perfect order. I tend, however, to think, say during the summer or early in a school year, I mean, there's some details to attach to this that I can't go into, but you create at least the bones of a common curriculum for each teacher or team of teachers. From there, and building into that, of course, sufficient amount, which is to say way more in terms of amount of reading and writing instruction. That's what curriculum is. It's those two things. It's content, skills, reading, writing, and writing instruction. Then the second or third part, if you will, is you begin to, I think, teach certain teachers within your school or district, make sure that they acquire the ability to provide powerful lessons structured along the lines of those I advocate in my books, and which I described in the presentation. And once they really get those down, they can in turn go out and train others. That's the basic scheme.
What do you think the role of the school leader is in all this?
Is to make sure those things happen, and they'll only be able to make those things happen, I believe, if they make those the near exclusive emphasis.
Do you look at school leadership when you're going out and teaching in the various spots that you?
I always do. And those who take on these elements and these elements alone and devote themselves to them, obsess over them, are the ones that succeed.
And you find that the climate and culture also is critical and allowing all of this.
For me, all the things I talk about, I'm quite convinced those create that culture. It's hard to create culture out of thin air or sort of artificially. I think when you create that kind of focus, coherence, and climate that's purposeful and evidence-based, everything changes. Esprit de corps, team spirit, and eventually results.
Oh, good. That's kind of what we're saying in CAR.
Good.
Not kind of. That's
yes.
what we are.
And I noticed that. I love in CAR your emphasis on relating anything in the curriculum to its real-world counterpart, which is great. Your emphasis on summative writing assessments. I was heartened to see that. There ought to be lots of writing assessment built into our day-to-day as well as benchmark and summative and formative assessments. Real good intersections there.
And those conversations also, I think, are critical.
conversations.
Within the PLC,
Oh,
with
yes,
the
of
leaders,
course.
with the teachers within the
And as I was
PLC.
saying to someone just an hour ago, PLC team meetings, 90% of the time in those meetings ought to be, what are we teaching? What's coming up? What are we going to be teaching soon? How can we teach it to get the best possible result? And then getting back together to say, what did we do that worked well and didn't? How can we make the next lesson, the next unit better? 90% of PLCs ought to be based on that. And of course, that requires at the outset a common curriculum.
What's that? We're really happy you joined us.
So happy you invited me. Had a
Yeah.
delightful morning with you all, and thank you for this time.
It's been great.
Same
Thanks
here,
very
Mary.
much.
Thank you. You bet.
Thank you all.